I just found out a deep, dark secret about my aunt you guys won't believe. First of all, the reason I'm so excited is because she's so annoying. She absolutely ruins my life and has convinced my parents that I'm the spawn of Satan. So what did I decide to do? Well, I'm going to release her secret to everybody. I'm the only son of my parents, and we recently moved to Canada from the United Kingdom. It was a significant change for all of us, but we were excited just to start this new chapter of our lives. My mother had gotten a lucrative job as a nurse, and we were all grateful for this opportunity. As a typical teenager, I was stubborn, but I loved my parents deeply. It was tough leaving my friends and everything I knew behind in the UK, but I was ready to make the best of this new adventure. 6 months after we arrived in Canada, my aunt Vanessa, who had been living in the US of A as a teacher, she came to visit us. It was the first time I was going to meet her. I was excited. We all had a nice time the first day she came. Aunt Vanessa was fun to be with, and I was already liking her. But my opinion changed by daybreak. The next morning, my aunt woke up to find my mother doing the dishes. This has been a tradition in our household, and it was something my mother enjoyed doing. However, my aunt seemed to have a problem with it. She questioned my mother about why she was doing dishes while I was still asleep. I could hear their conversation from my room, but I tried to ignore it just to go back to sleep. However, my aunt barged into my room and woke me up by shouting. She began talking about how children these days were being spoiled from the scratch, and how it was important and instill a sense of responsibility in us early on in life. Although I was still sleepy and not in the mood for a lecture, I knew that my aunt was right in a sense, but she was wrong to classify me as, quote, children of these days. I was not exactly happy that she could come to the house for the first time in my life and act like she owned the place. She hadn't even been around for up to 12 hours, and she was already giving off a negative vibe. I didn't want to show her the stubborn side of me, which my parents knew, so I got out of bed, put on my clothes, and headed to the kitchen to take over washing the dishes for Mom. It was something I ordinarily would not do, but I knew it was too early to start displaying stubbornness. Aunt Vanessa trailed me from behind just to make sure that I took over washing the dishes for my mother. I discovered that morning, too, that she had a sharp mouth. She began getting critical and judgmental by telling my mom that with the way they were raising me, I could turn out badly in life. She said that not minding the fact that I was present, and I was fuming on the inside, and I asked myself, why someone like her, who claims to be a professional in child raising, did not have a child of her own? She was not even married. I didn't know what to make of her sudden change in attitude between the night she came and that morning, but I didn't dwell on it. I decided that I was not going to let anyone make me feel like I was less than I was. After the morning incident with my aunt, I was happy to see my friends when they came to visit. They had already made their way to the door when my aunt stopped them, asking for their names and where they were from. I felt embarrassed as she scrutinized them, but my friends didn't seem to mind, to be honest. Finally, we made it up to my room, and I showed them my Grand Theft Auto games. They were excited to play it, but as soon as we started, they began to complain about my aunt, saying, "Yo, she's way too uptight." One of my friends said, "I don't think she liked us," and I just shrugged, feeling a bit defensive. Guys, she's just looking out for me." Well, I said that, though I had already discovered before them that she was a pain in the butt. As we played, I couldn't help but feel like my aunt was just watching us. Sure enough, a few moments later she burst into the room screaming as if we were an emergency. Her reaction was so sudden, so unexpected, that it startled me and my friends. We had no idea what was happening. "What are you doing playing this game? Do you know what kind of message it sends?" Well, I feel myself getting angry because I love this game. It's a classic. And I don't think it was harming anyone. But my aunt would not listen. My parents, who had heard her screams, rushed to the room thinking something serious must have happened, and she began lecturing my parents about how dangerous this violent video game could be, and how they could lead to gang activity in real life. She's claiming that children who played these types of games were 10 times more likely to join a gang and engage in criminal activities. My parents tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't listen. Finally, she made them take the game away from me, claiming that they were giving me too much freedom. Well, I was furious. I couldn't believe that my aunt had come into my home and taken away my games. But there was nothing I could do about it, and I knew that I had to respect my parents' decision, even if I did not agree with it. The rest of my aunt's stay was absolutely miserable. She continues to criticize my parents, and I could tell they were just getting fed up, but they didn't say anything, choosing instead to be polite and accommodating. Finally, the day came when my aunt had to leave. As she was getting ready to go, she turned to my parents and said, "You should send him over to my house during the holidays. I'll make sure he's not playing any of those video games." I felt my blood boil. I didn't want to go to my aunt's house, and I didn't want to be lectured about my behavior, but my parents just nodded politely, and my aunt left. I was so sure nothing would make me visit my aunt, and I didn't want someone who would interfere with my life and my interest. The holiday period soon came, and my aunt began calling my parents to send me over to her place. I rejected the suggestion, but my parents had to coerce me into going, as it was only for a while. They promised me that it would not be as bad as I was thinking. Oh boy, they were wrong, and I wish I would have known. I reluctantly agreed to go to my aunt's place, but that was the worst decision of my life. As I settled into my aunt's house for the holiday period, I couldn't help but notice the stark difference between her behavior at our house and how she was acting at her own. Her home was expensive and lavish, yet it was a complete mess. I couldn't believe a high school teacher could afford such a luxurious home, and it seemed a bit fishy. The next morning, I woke up early, decided to clean the home. It was something I rarely did at my parents' place, but my aunt's house desperately needed it, and I would not want to exhibit laziness so soon. As I made my way to my aunt's room to clean, she immediately objected to it, claiming that her room was her privacy and I had to respect that, and I found it funny that she was demanding privacy when she never respected anybody else's. My stay at her house was unbearable. My aunt was a controlling and demanding person who regulated everything from what I ate to the work that I had to do. She would give me tons of chores to do every day, and I was always exhausted by the end of the day. It was a far cry from the relaxed and carefree environment of my parents' home. I felt like I was in a prison, and my aunt was definitely the, warden. This was nothing close to the vacation my parents had promised me. It was hell. I could not take it anymore, and I decided to call my parents and plead with them to let me come home. I told them how my aunt had made me wake earlier than I usually did, compelled me to do chores, and how everything was just so darn boring. I felt my parents would quickly decide to bring me back home once they heard my explanation, but to my dismay they refused. They were glad that I was at my aunt's place, thinking that it would teach me some valuable lessons, and days turned to weeks and my stay with my aunt was becoming unbearable. She made me do chores all day and never allowed me to have any sort of fun. I was counting down the days till I could go back to my parents' house. Finally, the holiday period was over, and my parents came to pick me up. I was ecstatic to leave my aunt's house and go back home, and as we drove away from my aunt's house, I could not help but feel relieved that I would never have to go back there again. As we got home, I tried my possible best to forget my aunt's house, but I could not shake off the memories of the horror that I experienced there. I felt relieved that I was back in the comfort of my own home, but the experience had changed me in some ways that I simply could not explain. The morning after I arrived home, I woke up before my parents, feeling energized and ready to start the day. Without thinking much, I got out of bed and started cleaning the house. I did the dishes, I mopped the floor, and even dusted the furniture. It was as if I've been possessed by a cleaning spirit. My parents were surprised when they came downstairs and saw what I've done. They had never seen me so motivated to do house chores. They asked me what happened, and though I could not give a reasonable answer, they credited my experience at my aunt's place. They were glad to see that I'd learned something from my time there, and they called my aunt to thank her for the, quote, positive influence that she had on me. I was surprised that they were thanking her for the trauma she put me through, but I kept quiet. I'm pretty sure my aunt would have swollen with pride anyways, as my parents hailed her for, quote, working on me. After that, my parents promised that I would be spending more time at my aunt's place during the holidays. I was horrified at the thought, but my parents didn't care. They were just happy I'd suddenly turned from a lazy fellow to a hard-working man. School finally resumed, and I was excited to begin my final year of high school. I had also started dating my first girlfriend, and things were going well between us. One day, she came over to my house, and we were supposed to study together. My father, who was a security guard, he was on duty, while my mother was about to leave for her shift at the hospital. As soon as my mother left, my girlfriend and I got distracted and started fooling around. It was my first time, and we were careless enough to not lock the door. Suddenly, my mother walks back in to retrieve her phone, which she forgot, and caught us in the act red-handed. It was incredibly embarrassing, and my parents were not pleased with our behavior. They informed me that they were too busy to train me and that they needed someone else to help me finish high school. It took them a few seconds to decide on the right person to train me, and you guessed it, they called Aunt Vanessa and told her about what happened. Aunt Vanessa blew hot. She told my parents that I need an iron fist. My aunt suggested that I come and live with her a while, and I need to complete my studies since she was a teacher at a reputable high school, and she could monitor my progress. I absolutely dreaded the idea of living with my aunt, who has established herself to possess strictness and lack of tolerance for any form of discipline. I pleaded with my parents to deal with me in any other way besides sending me to stay with my aunt. If what was supposed to be a holiday was initially bad, then I knew I was in for the worst if I stayed with my aunt permanently. However, my parents were very firm in their decision, and I had no choice but to go along with it. So the next day, I packed my bags and left for our aunt's house. As soon as I arrived, I was greeted by my aunt's stern face, and I knew that living with her was going to be an absolute nightmare. She set stricter rules than she had initially set during my vacation, and expectations from me, and I had to adhere to them if I wanted to stay out of trouble. I'm currently living with her, and as you can guess right, living with her has not been easy. I have no choice but to make the best of the situation, and I was enrolled in her school yesterday, and I've been doing my best just to focus on my studies and stay out of trouble, as I know that any slip-ups would result in my aunt's wrath. Update number 1. Hey guys, so this is just 4 days since I started schooling, and my aunt's school and I'm just fed up. No matter how hard I tried adjusting and living with my aunt, she always found a way to make it difficult for me. She was at my neck at every point in time in school. Some folks in my class approached me to establish friendships, but it seemed like my aunt had to, vet every single one of them before I could even hang with them. The painful part is that she did not approve of, most of them. If they were not the brightest in the class or had questionable characters, then it was an instant no. On my 3rd day in school, a girl in my class seemed interested in getting to know me. My friends so far were just guys, and I didn't see anything wrong in having a girl within the circle. The girl in question and I began talking. It was a very interesting conversation from the get-go, and I can say we have a lot in common. As we chit-chatted, my aunt suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and the moment I saw Aunt Vanessa, I knew it could only mean one thing: trouble. My aunt got there and began to embarrass me in front of the girl. She painted me as her spoiled nephew who needed to be straightened out and warned the girl to stay far, far away from me. The friend? Wow, the embarrassment was too much, and I wished the ground would open up and swallow me. What was wrong with having a girl as a friend? Now, I get the picture. I was caught getting intimate with my girlfriend back at my parents' house, but why must my aunt paint the picture that I was a chronic womanizer who was out to sleep with every girl I came across? To make matters worse, my aunt's outburst attracted the attention of everyone in the class. I felt like a laughingstock and my pride was hurt. I was angry with my aunt. How could she be embarrassing me like that in front of everyone? I'd only been in school for a few days and she had already ruined my reputation. I got to school today and everyone avoided me like a plague, thanks to my aunt. Now, I don't think I can stay here anymore. I'll have to call my parents and plead with them to come take me home. I can't take this anymore. It's either I go back home or find a way to survive in this school without my aunt's constant embarrassment. Update number 2. Hey guys, thought an update wasn't due, so I called my parents 2 days ago in desperation, just pleading with them to take me away from my aunt's house, but they refused. They said that I simply needed to finish high school there, and that was final. I felt so hopeless, like I had no one on my side. To make things even worse, my Aunt Vanessa found out about the call and twisted the situation with my parents and called her to check on me. She painted me as a spoiled brat who was throwing tantrums because I could not sleep with any girl I wanted. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could she lie like that? My parents thanked my aunt for handling the situation, and they saw her as the savior who was saving their darned son. My parents called to express their disappointment in me. They were vexed that I was still trying by all means to live an immoral life. I tried explaining to them that my aunt had blown the situation completely out of proportion, but they did not give me any chance to explain myself. I could not believe my parents believed my aunt's lies about me. My aunt was not going to let the whole thing slide either. She was very much offended that I've called my parents behind her back in an attempt to, leave her home. She even took away my phone so I could not call them again, and even went as far as asking my parents to stop sending me allowance because I would only use it to, quote, mess about. So, my parents at this point were willing to do anything she suggested, and they stopped sending me the weekly allowance which they've been doing. I feel so trapped and alone. How can someone come into your life out of nowhere and just decide to torment you? Now, my daily schedule consists of reading books, doing chores, and going to school. My aunts made it very clear that I am not to deviate from this routine. I feel suffocated like I'm living in a prison cell. Every single day I wake up with a sense of dread, wondering what new rule my aunt will come up with. I'm so frustrated with the whole situation. I'd even grown up hearing them say, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, but my aunt would rather have me as a dull boy than see me having a fun time. I was not permitted to have the few friends which she permitted me to keep come to the home. This is where she led by example. She had never received any visitors since I came to live with her, and I think it's been that way with her. I guess I'm not the only one who knows she's a jerk. I've never felt this helpless before. I feel like my life is out of control and there's nothing I can do to change it. I just hope that things will get better soon because I don't know how much more of this I can take. Update number 3. Wonders shall never die. I've just discovered that the one who was taught by all to be the angel, She was a devil in disguise. My aunt is a stinky hypocrite. I got to school yesterday and Richard, one of the few friends which my aunt permitted me to keep, he approached me. Richard made good grades and he was praised by the school authorities, but what they did not know was that he equally engaged in certain activities common to teenagers. Richard wanted me to join him in watching a video, and I initially refused as I did not want to get in trouble with my aunt, but let me tell you, Richard persisted. He noted that I would love what I was about to see, and my aunt, who was having a teacher's meeting with the proprietor of the school, would not find out. I finally gave in and watched the video. Well, it was an adult video, where a young model was performing for her subscribers. She looked hot. This was like my second time even watching an adult video before, and Richard noticed my eyes growing. He felt I was intrigued by the performance of the model, which was raunchy, by the way, but no. I was surprised at the striking resemblance of the background where the model was performing. It was identical in every sense to the parlor of my aunt's house. I said nothing about it to my friend Richard, as I needed to be sure I was seeing things correctly. I decided to satisfy my curiosity once I got home that day. I could barely wait for the school hours to be over, and I left the premises immediately after we were dismissed. I need to get my answers before my aunt got home. As I walked home, my mind was racing with different possibilities. Could my aunt be involved in the production of this video? Was it possible that someone had used her house as a location without her knowledge? Or was it all just a coincidence? My aunt was not around when I got home, thank goodness. I felt she was probably still in school or the store, so I took the opportunity to investigate the living room and compare it to the video. It was hard to tell for sure, but the furniture, curtains, decorations looked eerily similar. I felt a pit in my stomach as I considered the possibility that my aunt could be involved in something so disgusting. My curiosity was piqued, and I knew I needed to find out more. I decided to snoop around my aunt's room to see if I could find any evidence, and I was scared to the bones at the thought of entering her room, as she had always forbid me from doing so. I knew it spelled doom for me if she ever learned that I defied her order to enter the room, but I needed to satisfy my curiosity, so I just took the risk. I entered and searched through her drawers, closet, and even under her bed, but I didn't find anything incriminating. Just as I was about to give up, I noticed a locker drawer in her bedside table. I knew I should not invade her privacy like this, but I could not resist. I found a bobby pin, and I picked that lock. Feeling guilty the whole time, inside the drawer I found a stack of envelopes with money. There were also some receipts for hotel rooms, lingerie. I felt sick to my stomach as I realized what I've discovered. My aunt was definitely involved in the adult industry, and she was profiting from it. Her laptop was lying carelessly on her bed, and I began to dive into it. I was shocked at what I further discovered. My aunt was not just into the adult industry. She was a popular OnlyFans model who catfished. For those who don't know, catfishing is when someone sets up a fake profile online just to trick people who are looking for love, usually to get money out of them. I shut the laptop down and stared into space. I couldn't believe it. My aunt, who was supposed to be taking care of me and instilling discipline, was involved in something so immoral. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her? Should I tell my parents? Would my parents even believe that my aunt was an OnlyFans model who used to Photoshop to catfish? I sat there in shock, unsure what to do next. I have just uncovered a dark family secret about my aunt, something which no one knew about or would ever even believe without proof. This was the perfect time to get back at my aunt, and so I began plotting my scheme. She would pay for coming to my life and turning it upside down, one way or the other. Update number 4. Well, guys, let me just skip ahead. My Aunt Vanessa is officially wrecked, and this is my doing. Yes, I'm proud to say so, and after I've discovered the true source of her wealth, I continue to investigate my aunt's shady activities. The more I investigated, the more determined I was to expose her for what she was. It was not an easy task, as she was very careful to cover her tracks and keep her dirty, dark secret hidden from me. However, I knew I had to act quickly as I was fed up with living with her. I started observing her movements more closely, paying attention to when she would leave the school where she taught and return home. It didn't take long for me to figure out that she was using the time to shoot her videos. She would go to the great lengths to keep me in the dark about her activities, but I was determined to find out the absolute truth. As time went on, I noticed that my aunt would stay up all night late, editing her videos while I was forced to go to bed early. I made plans to come back from school earlier than her so I could lay my hands on her videos. I had the opportunity yesterday, and my aunt was still in school when I returned, and so I began collecting my, quote, tools of destruction. I quickly copied the videos, both original and edited, before sending them to my friend Richard's email address. I made sure to delete all traces of the files so that my aunt wouldn't even find out I touched it. I knew that Richard would know what to do with the videos, and together we came up with a plan to expose my aunt's dirty little secrets. Richard got a new device and put the videos on it. Yesterday, while the students were out on break, he left the video playing in the classroom. When the students returned, they were shocked to find my aunt, the well-respected disciplinarian, in the video. They quickly spread the word around the school, and it wasn't long before the news got back to the school proprietor. The school administrator was appalled by my aunt's actions and immediately fired her on the spot without even asking questions. The administrator was probably doing his best to contain the situation, as he knew that most parents would be very skeptical about allowing their children to remain students in a school where their teacher was an adult content producer. She was humiliated and dismissed, her reputation in tatters. Yeah, it was harsh, but necessary consequences of her actions. Once the video was leaked, I knew that I could not go back to my aunt's house, as she knew I was the one who would have leaked the video, since no one even had access to her home. I went straight to Richard's house, where I'm currently staying. His parents were willing to accommodate me while I tried to reach out to my parents. Update number 5, final update of the story. Well, I lack the words to express the joy that I feel. I really do, as I make this update. I'm not breathing the air of freedom. I finally reached out to my parents to update them on the latest discovery about my aunt. They initially doubted me just like other times, and I've had enough evidence to gain their attention, so I sent it to them, and I insisted that they check their email for the proof that I've sent them. I'd saved the original videos and the edited ones that my aunt had been sending to her clients. My parents were stunned and disappointed in my aunt's behavior. They tried reaching her mobile line, but she refused to answer. She rightfully suspected that the news has gotten to them. I went ahead to inform my parents that I was staying at a friend's place, as my aunt would probably skin me alive for blowing her cover. Well, my parents drove down to Richard's place the next day to pick me up. They thanked him and his family before we drove down to my aunt's place to go get my things. My aunt was so ashamed to face my parents, and even though she wanted to lash out at me, she couldn't. My parents did not bother saying anything to her. They just loaded my things into the car, and we were about to drive out when I informed them that we were yet to retrieve my phone from my aunt, which she seized from me some weeks ago. The look of anger was written over my aunt's face as she watched us drive away. If she could, she would have killed me. But if she so as such attempted, then she would see a violent part of my mother, which she knew way back from when they were growing up. It took us about 2 hours before we got home, and I was just so grateful to arrive. Though, I would miss the few friends I've made where my aunt was living, and I could finally kiss that boring life goodbye. No more living like I'm in a barrack. As I settled back into my old routine, I could not help but feel a sense of relief relief that my aunt would never interfere in our lives again. It was a sweet feeling that I would never trade for all the money in the world. I currently don't know how my Aunt Vanessa's faring, and I honestly don't care. My parents recently gave me my game, which they've seized, and my friends would be coming over by the weekend. I'm sure they would be glad my aunt would not be the one answering the door when they knock. Okay, so I want to hear from you guys about this story. It's a very unique situation, but let's talk about it. If you are OP and you find out about this deep, dark secret of your aunt, and you want to expose it so bad for all the way that she's treated you, do you do what OP did? Do you release it for everybody to know? Have her lose her career, estranged from the family, and basically shunned away? Let me know your thoughts. What would you do? Drop it in the comment section down below, guys. I want to thank you for joining me on today's video. This one was definitely a wild ride, and I enjoyed it. Post your comments down below if you've ever had a similar experience to today's story. Consider subscribing for more daily stories, and also, if you go to the description section right below this video, you can find my other channels as well with more daily videos. Stick around for the next one that's coming out very soon, and I will see you guys tomorrow.